Chers confrères, mesdames, messieurs, je vais peut-être commencer en français, après on va passer à l'anglais pour la discussion. Maintenant, cet après-midi, c'est ce qu'on appelle en anglais « the graveyard slot », mais on va essayer de rendre ça un peu plus actif. On va parler de l'avenir des cabinets d'avocats. Donc c'est vraiment l'aspect business, l'aspect affaires du droit. Je vous présente brièvement nos intervenants de gauche à droite, dans l'ordre de leurs interventions. Boris Visser, spécialisé en droit financier. Il a conseillé la Banque centrale néerlandaise pour ses interventions dans les organismes financiers. Head of Innovation and Business Change dans un cabinet au niveau mondial. Et puis ensuite, Jaap Bosman. Il n'est pas avocat, mais consultant. Bienvenue à notre table ronde cet après-midi, mais consultant en innovation juridique, donc très pertinent pour cet après-midi, pour le sujet de cet après-midi. Il a, je crois, le goût pour la polémique. La preuve en est le titre de son livre « Death of a Law Firm ». On peut peut-être attendre du franc-parler du côté néerlandais à ma gauche. Et ensuite, Robert Bourns, président de la Law Society d'England Wales. Il contredit un petit peu les stéréotypes des solliciteurs dans la mesure où il a passé plusieurs années à plaider devant les tribunaux pénaux en Angleterre. Maintenant, il exerce des fonctions bien, on dirait, plus importantes, mais peut-être pas. Peut-être qu'en début de carrière, c'était vraiment ça l'essentiel. Aujourd'hui, il nous présente un rapport de la Law Society qui a l'air d'accepter le besoin d'évolution pour les cabinets juridiques, mais il n'accepte pas la thèse évidente du titre du livre de M. Bosman. Ça, donc, on espère avoir un petit peu de débat là-dessus. Et puis ensuite, à extrême droite, Valls Martínez, président du laboratoire d'idées du barreau de Barcelone. Félicitations pour le barreau de Barcelone d'avoir un comité avec un tel titre. Son rôle est de réfléchir avec un peu de recul. Où vont les cabinets juridiques? Quels sont les critères nécessaires pour réussir dans le futur? Donc avec cette introduction en langue française, on va peut-être passer à l'anglais. If I can ask Boris Visser to start off the discussion.
Yeah, I will do it, although I think French is a very beautiful language. I'm not capable of speaking it well. So, my name is Boris Visser. I'm a partner in the finance group, and I'm also the global head of innovation and business change at Clifford. And maybe it was because of the length of this title or because the role was new, but it was sort of a mixed response to my appointment in January 2015. I've worked long enough in an English environment to know to be on guard when an English person congratulates you with your interesting new role.
Oui, oui.
And also, quite a number of my clients were sort of seemed to be checking my sanity and well-being. They said, Boris, law firms and innovation, lawyers and change, what are you thinking? Well, what we were thinking as a firm was that the world around us is changing very rapidly, and we needed to do something extra to sort of stay in touch with some new realities that many of our clients are under increasing pressure to reduce their legal spend, and that whilst they need more help. New realities that we see more and more disruptors coming into the market, which was the traditional domain of, let's say, the traditional law firms. And add to that the fact that the majority of the people working within the offices of Clifford Chance are so-called millennials who have a different and, in my view, quite refreshing view of working life, and the fact that technology is playing an increasingly dominant role in our life, and especially also the lives of our clients. I think there are plenty of objective reasons why we all as lawyers and law firms should embrace innovation and change. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that as lawyers and law firms, we quite struggle with change. And I want to show you very briefly a short film which sort of illustrates that point. So if we could ask the technicians to...
Thank you for your time and welcome to our focus group. Today we're going to show you an idea and ask for your opinion. This is called a wheel. Now, according to its developers, it'll change the way we work and live. Why? Because it rolls. It can also be added to wagons to make moving a heavy load easier. Your opinions?
If it rolls, that means it could roll away and get lost. right? Or it could roll over your foot. It's the round shape that disturbs me. It's very feminine. I can't imagine any caveman wanting to be seen with that.
I think.
I wouldn't.
And this.
I think you sort of get the point. I can come up with many other reasons why we lawyers sometimes get in our own way just because of some lawyer characteristics. And that is not very helpful when you want to change the business we run. So my role is very much about creating awareness, about trying to change mindset and behavior. But we all know that we will not make the required changes overnight. What I do ask everybody within Clifford Chance is to at least have an open mind to innovation, to be appreciative of those who try to innovate and change. Because it's so easy to say no to an idea or to shoot a hole in a proposal. I challenge people to be more daring and sometimes say, yes, let's try, or yes, let's try to fix that hole, and encourage that type of behavior. Because working in a more open-minded, appreciative and positive environment is not only more fun, it's also much more likely to encourage all these very bright young people we all have in our law firms to dare to come up with their ideas of the law firms of the future. And it's those ideas I think we need to capture if you want to be successful going forward. Innovation, we think, is really a fantastic way to engage our younger lawyers and professionals. And also, when you look, for instance, at seeing the opportunities that come with technology, that's much more likely to come more natural to someone younger who's grown up with an iPad, social media, and Google than it is for someone who started to work at a time that the fax machine was the most advanced way of communication, or maybe even before that. Over now from mindset awareness to action, because I'm absolutely convinced that we as a sector will need to provide evidence, hard evidence, to our clients and the people working within our law firms that we are actually capable of innovation and change. As a firm, we approach this by taking small but concrete steps towards helping the clients with this more for less dilemma. That means introducing solid project management tools, introducing new roles like resource managers, transaction managers. We recently appointed a commercial director and a global head of client service solutions. Also, we're rolling out technology-based client solutions, and we're trying to see and establish what is it actually like to work with these alternative legal service providers, because quite often that may well be in the best interest of our clients. Let me finish by giving you two concrete examples of these technology-based client solutions that we are rolling out as a firm. One is in the area of document automation, where we launched a product called Clifford Chance Draft. What we do here is we have a number of high-quality lawyers who are at the same time coding experts, which I think is still a pretty rare combination of skills. And they dedicate their time to develop and automate templates of our clients. And once the template is ready, we place it in the private cloud of Clifford Chance. The client then buys a per-user license, and from that moment can generate independently tailor-made and house-styled documents simply by completing a questionnaire.
Just need to finish up.
And another example is in the area of artificial intelligence, which we just heard about, where we entered into a partnership with AI software developer Kira Systems. And Kira is what we call sort of the second wave of artificial intelligence in the legal industry, with the e-discovery products, the very advanced e-discovery products, being the first wave. What Kira does, it can dig deeper into the structure of a document, and it can extract certain clauses and provisions. And we are convinced it will transform the way that law firms do due diligence exercises. And why we like Kira is that it comes with good built-in provisions, but then we can train Kira ourselves to make sure that it also meets the specific needs of our clients. I'm finishing because I got my cue. thank you very much. I'm actually really quite positive about the environment for change, and I hope you will be as well. Thank you very much.
So yeah, apparently in the global law firm of the future, it's going to be like working in Google, or where you try and harness the skills of everybody within the firm. But what do you think about this, Jaap?
Well, I think it is not about computers. We've been talking about computers pretty much up till now today. And of course it is exciting. But the law revolves around humans. The computer will help, as Ross just explained. It will support us. It's the answer to a problem, which I will highlight with a short film to start, with sound. So far, we have been talking about our profession as nobile officium, a noble profession. But my friends, in the end, it's business. We all run businesses. Whether it's a big law firm or an individual practitioner, we need to make profit. It is a subject that is often overlooked. So therefore, I want to dive into the financials of law firms. We will dive into it. Yes, we should go back now. Okay. What is important is only a few slides, and it's basically, and it's simple. What is important is the notion of cost. At a law firm, cost is fixed. Unlike other businesses where costs vary with production or with revenue, in a law firm, cost is fixed. So this is a simple model. We have a revenue of 100, we have cost at 66, so the profit for the partners is 34. All right. Now we have a good year. We do 10% extra in revenue. Costs remain the same. So, 66. What happens to profit? Profit explodes. Happy partners plus 30%. 10% more revenue, 30% more profit. You get the drift. Now is the next year. We do slightly less, only 10%, due to discounts, due to pressure on price, due to whatever cause. Obviously, costs remain the same. Well, it's pretty easy what happens next. Profit plummets, unhappy partners. So it's basically important to understand the leveraged mechanism between revenue on the one hand and profit in the other. So if we are giving away 10% discount, we are basically giving away 30% of profit. That's one. The other thing that we need to discuss is the influence of profitable partners leaving. This is a typical law firm, whereas there are 50 partners at total, there are 40 who are on average, which is 200. There are 5 which, for whatever reasons, are below average, they do 100. And there are 5 that are above average because of their practice, because they're brilliant, because of whatever reason. They do 300. Let's go back to the previous slide. Profit is down because we do a little less in revenue. And these 5 partners, they get unhappy. They say, well, we were always supporting the firm, we do considerably more than our fellow partners, but now profit is down and we really feel it's unfair. You know what? We leave. We leave. 5 partners leaving results in a profit drop for the remaining partners due to the cost being fixed from 70 to 44. It's almost half. So, what is the single most important disruptive factor in the legal industry? It is not the computer. It isn't. The single most disruptive factor is commoditization. What is commoditization? Commoditization is not easy work. Commoditization is not bulk work. Commoditization is when, from the perspective of the client, so not our perspective, the perspective of the client, there are numerous lawyers, so multiple lawyers, multiple law firms who can perform the same task equally well. It means that I can choose. I already disregarded the people I don't like, I disregarded the people that are conflicted, and still I can choose. What happens next if everything else is equal? Well, we need to talk price, don't we? And we will. And you have just seen what the corrosive effect of a drop in price will be. So the single most important corrosive and disruptive thing in the legal industry today is not Watson, it's not Ross, it's not the computer, it's not the fancy app, it's not Axiom, it's not LegalZoom. It is commoditization. To give you an example, if you go to London, some of you might be familiar with, let's say, project finance work. Project finance it's quite complicated stuff. You really need to be into it in order to do it. In London, there are so many qualified project finance lawyers that it is today a totally commoditized market, even though it is difficult work to do. Now back to the lawyers. If I talk to lawyers, wherever I go, in whatever country, whatever the size of the law firm, and I ask, is there commoditization? Yes, Jaap, of course, there is commoditization. But you know what? It's not my practice. What I do is highly bespoke and extremely difficult. Always, invariably, that's what they say. So what makes this corrosive effect of commoditization even more dangerous than it already is the fact that we all suffer from commoditization blindness. So we don't need to run into apps. We need to address and we need to find a solution to this challenge. And there comes Ross. And there comes the other IT. IT is not part of the problem. IT will be part of the solution as there will be other parts of the solution. I think we will discuss more of it later.
Excellent.
And we have a report for those of you who are interested on commoditization in the legal market. It's available over there.
Thank you. So, Robert, apparently we're sleepwalking into the abyss. You've been doing some research on this within the Law Society, and you've got some evidence. Regulators like evidence.
Hugh, thank you very much indeed. Yes, the Law Society. I was going to say, actually, I listened to Patrick Henry earlier, and he talked about une explication rather than l'explication. My franglais is not up to it, but this is just one view, and we've heard a number of views across the table. I was also fascinated. I don't have a film, but I wondered if the cave women had been invited to consider the wheel, then the decision might have been differently, and perhaps that indicates that diversity in the decision-making group can have benefits. Anyway, moving on. Yes, we published research, and I think just a forward look. Future of Legal Services, it will be available online. We're trying to predict what's going to happen to our population of members over the coming 4 to 5 years. Of course, as soon as you publish anything, it's overtaken by events, so there we are. Personally, I am optimistic. Law firms have a future. Our survey says that 60% of individuals buy legal services on the basis they want to obtain specialist knowledge rather than just being dictated by price. So there's an element of value there, and that's important, because I think we are only able and we're only entitled to practice if we understand, and therefore we need to listen to and communicate with our clients and understand how they define value now and in the future. We have this discussion in this sector and profession. Our clients in their own sectors and professions are having similar discussions because they are subject to similar pressures. I was a managing partner and then senior partner of a firm that grew from one office down in a provincial city in Bristol to become a national practice across the UK. We did that by listening to our clients. And I remember going to see one of my partners who told me the work he was doing for a particular client was complex. I went to the client, it was not complex. It was something very low down the tree in terms of the quality of the work. We needed to adjust the way in which we viewed, we needed to understand how our clients define things. I heard recently from a senior partner in a city practice, not the senior partner, a senior partner, who was horrified that a client they'd worked with for some 25 years had rung him and said the next piece of serious litigation would be dealt with in the following way. They were going to instruct learned, senior, able counsel to provide the strategic advice. They were going to use a not Silver Circle firm, not Magic Circle firm, somebody further down the food chain to deal with disclosure and pre-litigation due diligence. And the bit that was left for the firm was minimal. He was horrified. What that told me was that he had lost control of the relationship. He had lost control of the ability to engage in that discussion about how things are valued and how work can be done differently in order to provide value and also provide return for the firm. So I was asked to talk about small firms. If we keep an eye on that, so the client value, the client relationship, if we continue to control that and manage that and communicate two-way process, then I think we have a good future as practitioners. Small firms, England and Wales, we define that as 1 to 4 partners. There are 26,000 people employed in those firms, and about 9,000 of our firms out of a total population of about 10,000. However, it's only 20% of the population. I think they have a good future. We are told that about 1,000 new entities will register this year. It is part of a network of provision. It provides valuable access to justice. They focus on clients, and if they continue to focus on clients who buy in a particular way, I think they have a good future, both now and in the future. What we see, increasingly fixed price. In family work in 2012, 12% of that work was dictated on a fixed price basis. We told last year, 2014 rather, 45% of that work was now done on a fixed price basis. In terms of across the profession as a whole, 46% of work done on a fixed price basis in 2014, up from 38%. So clients are demanding, going to that choice, what we do next. I think some of the drivers, and we've heard about Ross, and it's very often said to me that IT, artificial intelligence, will drive change. I think it serves change. Again, if we remain in control of the dialogue, we have a good future. If we allow it to overtake us, then we are in trouble. I think some of those things actually will reduce the cost of access into practice. I noticed on Jaap's film, The Death of a Law Firm, that monumental masonry, the cost associated with that. Actually, many firms are now practicing out of a serviced accommodation office, Regis Commerce. We had a project, some pre-litigation due diligence. We assembled a team, 6 weeks' work in Regis office accommodation, supervised by a partner and an associate. We got the work done. We had a profit margin of 50% on that work on a fixed price basis. The team then disintegrated and went on to do other things. So premises costs can be dealt with on a flexible basis. One of the things that concerns me for practitioners, particularly in small firms, is being able to retire on terms and at a time of their choosing. So the models that we practice through change over time. We've heard about a mix of a way in which we've got a number of firms that provide effectively almost chambers-like facilities for solicitor practitioners. They deal with the regulation, they deal with the administration, they deal with the brand name, they deal with the marketing, but the practitioners sit behind that, and they can work together or not as depending on the nature of the work. It provides flexibility, it provides a future. We've heard about alternative business structures. We've heard they're 15% more innovative than traditional law firms. Frankly, that to me is like 8 out of 10 cats prefer. Actually, the majority of ABSs to date have been put together by solicitors because they want to use capital beyond their own or that borrowed from the bank, and it reflects the nature of the work they're doing and the nature of the clients that they have. So we have a government in England and Wales, not our colleagues, our friends in Scotland and in Northern Ireland don't suffer quite the same iniquities. Our government regards regulation as promoting competition in a marketplace, and it regards competition as really being the sum total of regulation. It seems to me that we need to deal with the essence of regulation, of profession rather, the nature of what regulation should be, public legal education. Going forward, it's important we provide our practitioners, ourselves, people coming through, next generation, with the appropriate skills. I call it line of sight. But I am concerned that excellent lawyers practicing to the highest standards are overtaken by events. As a representative body, we have a responsibility to make sure that they don't lose the room for manoeuvre. So focus on clients, develop those skills, take the benefit of the generational shift. Don't allow yourself to be captured within a status quo of an existing practicing structure. If you can do that and control your costs and remain in dialogue with your clients, you have a very good future. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Robert. So clients are prepared to pay for the added value. Doesn't that put at risk I just wonder whether Carlos might come back on this. Doesn't that put at risk the way in which some firms work, whereby you've got a partner, you've got 5, 6, or maybe 7 associates working underneath him. The job of the partner is to feed the associates with work, which they'll then do, and there must be big jobs. Whereas, in fact, the clients would like to get the partner's expertise and then do the associated work, maybe at a lower level with a lower firm. That maybe, is this going to really endanger, to go at the heart of the traditional law firm model?
That's a very good question. I would like to stand up. First of all, it was very interesting, the commoditization part that Mr. Bosman said. And actually, I have to say that would go to my slides, wouldn't it? Would I have? It's excellent, thank you. And excellent, let me make a very, very bad joke. You have the name, precisely, of a case law that disrupted the whole football industry. So you're on the right side. I will not, I have to thank the Barcelona and the Spanish Council of Lawyers for allowing me here tonight. I will not start with a quote, but with two. One, it's seen the whole day we are moving between these two quotes. On the one hand, Samuel Johnson saying, when you know you're going to be hung up the next morning, you focus your thoughts. And the other one is Roosevelt, President Roosevelt saying, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. So we have to be in those two limits. Sorry, how does that go? Oh, the green one. Oh, the big one, of course. Let me just give briefly the framework before going into commoditization and innovation. The framework is, first of all, we have to know what is ultimately the role of lawyers in society. It has been mentioned this morning, so I won't insist, but we are very important players to represent and protect the rule of law. But I want to go to the second aspect, which is the nature of our legal services. And I think we have something very special that cannot be, makes us not be comparable to other services, perhaps with doctors, which is that the clients will never know the quality really of our advice. What I mean by that, the clients will never know if we've sent them to a litigation that we shouldn't have sent them, or we should have settled when we shouldn't, etc. And that makes us, our service, a little bit opaque, ultimately. And they cannot check with another lawyer because it also will have a different criteria and cannot be checked. As a result, there is an inherent conflict of interest between the lawyer and the client, the firm, and our, let's say, our purchases of our services. And that has to be managed, and that is known since ancient times. You can see all the jokes about lawyers, and that has to be managed extremely carefully, because otherwise we destroy the confidence of society in the whole sector. That's why we have councils. That's why in many countries it's compulsory to become a member of the bar or the law society, etc. So let's not forget this aspect that affects us all, and particularly society. I mentioned that there is therefore the telos of the legal profession. That means that in order to protect, and telos, maybe somebody has already ascertained that I'm influenced by the philosopher Alistair MacIntyre, who thinks that in practices, he's not only thinking about a law firm or the law, he's thinking of those practices that are developed so that they should reward its members with inner goods, internal goods, as opposed to external goods. External goods could be money, power, big clients, etc. Inner goods could be doing the job right, managing correctly the inherent conflict of interest with clients. And that is key as well, that the whole profession is not disappointed, but rather there is an element of enthusiasm towards doing well what we should do. So what is commoditization? I think it's a very good opening that Mr. Bosman has suggested. But first of all, what's the real problem? The real problem is legal services seem to be becoming unaffordable to many people nowadays. I think, though, this is not happening in all jurisdictions. You saw, for example, in Spain, in the Rocket Legal presentation, that in Spain, clients went to the lawyer and their difficulty was not price. It was complex, etc. It was not price. Whereas in other jurisdictions, it may be. I think, and this is very delicate, but I want to share it with you, I think the adversarial system makes it a little bit too expensive. Even though it has enormous beauties, it has to be tamed a little bit. And in this respect, there is an excellent example in the IP Enterprises County Court on IP, but where there are certain limits that show the way. Maybe the problem are not so much lawyers, not so much lack of competition, but the legal system itself. That's just a suggestion. Commoditization, perhaps I could ask the floor if we have a discussion, what is it and is it not commoditization? Because, for example, in the example of project finance, it is true there is a price war, but at the same time you will always need a lawyer to recommend arbitration clause, jurisdiction clause, which covenants to include, etc. And the way he or she advises may be in benefit of the lawyer or of the client. If he chooses arbitration, maybe he has connections with arbitration, I don't know, maybe it's a bad advice long term. So there is always this tension, and a good lawyer can always, I think that's what the market wants. And there's the other risk. I'm talking about technology. I'll come in a minute. There is the risk that we confuse the market. We say that our work is too easy, etc. So we have to be careful about this. We have a lot of examples of the innovation that we are already carrying on. So I don't think we are stopped or paralyzed. Technology is not an end in itself, but do we really, that's the last idea I want to share with you, do we really want to transform our practice from professional intensive to capital intensive? I think there are huge risks that we should consider here. There is risk of oligopolization, loss of independence. That's a thought I wanted to share with you. The future of law firms, you can see some ideas. There are many things we could do to innovate, but go beyond technology. So at the end of the day, there's an element that I wanted to share with you as well, which is obviously debatable. But should we not try to think that our profession should be not so much oriented to efficacy and profit, but making a balance there to reach other people that can pay less and make the balance with the clients can pay more? This is typical comment from a small or medium-sized law firm, but I leave that. So, in conclusion, I think society and the rule of law need a reliable profession, a profession that deals with the interests of the clients. Thank you very much.
Well, that's really quite a lovely symmetry, in fact, because Carlos was ending up talking about the associates and the way to treat young associates. That's where Boris started. I mean, that is part of it, isn't it? Trying to get really the best out of everybody and not just have the people on high who dictate the conduct to the young lawyers. What about our challenge panel? Neil, Bruno, any particular questions for our speakers?
No, it was very interesting, and it's very interesting to hear about the death of a law firm after reading it. And it is very thoughtful that lawyers are very conscious about what their business is transforming into, because we are all lawyers, including law professors. We're thinking about the future of our profession, so we're writing books about it, and that's a very good thing. Now, speaking about French lawyers, which I know the best, I know that it is always difficult for them to apprehend the very, very quick changes that are affecting their profession. So it's often brutal to read the Susskind books or yours, because they're about, it's not depreciative to say another reality, but countries where legal activity is less regulated. So it's both interesting and At the same time, we must be conscious that the French regulation, the French legal system is quite different today, still different.
May I answer?
Of course. Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, it's an observation, not really a question, but let me say this, there is always time enough. The world doesn't change overnight. It's like the airline industry, which is an analogy which is quite fitting, actually. When Ryanair and EasyJet started, they were laughed at. No one would want to fly like that and have no allocated seat, whatever. But it took about almost 10 years, almost a decade, before it was too late for the conventional airlines. It's the same in our profession. Yes, things are changing, but they don't change overnight. That's one. There is always time to adjust. The only thing, doing nothing is not an option. That's one. And the good news is that, let's say, global legal spend is growing. We are not in a shrinking market. We just have to adjust our business model depending on where we operate. That's the only thing we have to do. There is a bright future for all of us. The only thing is, if you don't change, it will be the death of your law firm.
I would disagree to some extent.
Excellent. Excellent. We like disagreement.
That doing nothing is an option, obviously, and there'll be an awful lot of lawyers who choose that option. But if you make, there is surely in some cases there will be, if you make an active decision not to change, then because it suits you, it is right for you and your clients at that moment.
Well, there is an example in London at the moment. You've got the small to medium-sized firms. Some of them stayed small and niche and really focused on their business area, and they're still thriving. Others tried to expand and be a sort of an all-service law firm to everybody, and I think they're going through a tough patch at the moment.
Well, I mean, it's classic, isn't it? You have to know who your clients are. You also have to know what decision you've made in the context of managing your business. So there are people, you're right, Neil, who can perfectly validly say, I'm not going to bother to recruit people, I'm not going to bother to develop people, I'm occupying premises where the lease falls in at about the time that I want to retire, I can deal with the liability or I can sell the practice on to somebody because it's neat and tidy and it doesn't have liabilities associated with it and I've kept it in good order. It's the people who sleepwalk into it. So you're absolutely right. It's perfectly possible to make a decision to do nothing, but you've got to understand the consequences of that.
Changing, sorry.
Yes, no, please, Neil.
Well, changing tack slightly, very few lawyers, if you ask them, if you started again, your law firm again now, would it be the same? And particularly what's happened in recently, last 10 years or so in terms of technology, etc., they would say no. So particularly if you're working at a firm like Clifford, which has been around a very long time, and there is a lot of legacy issues there around how it operates, and there's a partnership. I mean, hardly any law firm, new law firms in England and Wales are partnerships. They're all limited companies. To what extent are actually a lot of law firms simply inhibited by their structure and their history?
Can I
please,
respond to that? I think it's incredibly important to ask yourself the question, what would a law firm like if you would do it from a whiteboard? Because that's probably how a client looks at it, not just a client. I emphasized a lot and also in my presentation, we are a business which is building on people. And I have to say that the discussion we often see around this very much focused on profit and surviving, or, and also with all respect to ourselves, but having 6 middle-aged men on a stage talking about the future of the law. If you would talk about the law firm designing it from scratch, it would look very, very different. And I think that's where the answer is. And absolutely right, agree with Nick that we are, of course, in some way burdened by legacy, etc. But that's relative because it's a people's business. If you can change people and you can bring in the younger people within your organizations into this discussion, bringing the female, a very talented female, and holding on to them into the firms, you would already be structuring a very, very different firm. And I think it's incredibly important to, within the discussion of the law firm of the future, not just focus on how to survive, keep it profitable, things which are essential, but also what can you really do to make it the best possible service provider for your clients and the most inspirational working environment for your people. Because if you can't attract those new people, then you also don't have a business.
Yeah, so it's really a people business. I mean, that really links up to what Bruno was saying earlier about the people, about the effect on young people, because it must be partly about harnessing the enthusiasm and the ideas of the young lawyers. I always think, somebody once told me that being a parent is making sure that that flame of life, which burns brightly at 6 months old, is still burning just as brightly at 18 years old. And I suppose in a way, possibly in a law firm as well, that the old model whereby you look up to the partner or the QC or whoever's leading the case and he does everything, if you can somehow harness the enthusiasm of the young lawyers. What do you think, Bruno?
Yeah, as a challenging panel, I must try to reply. So I will, now maybe, Jaap, I want to add something. You said there is a bright future for every one of us. I'm confident in the future of the lawyering activity, but I would say there is a bright future for every one of us who will adapt.
Right. Well, it's about adapting, and it's also, let's say the young people. Of course, we need the young people. What do young people want? They want to work on inspiring cases. So unless you are able, let's say as a top law firm, to have these cases, you will not attract bright people because bright people want to do bright work. So there is a future, and you can make, and my thesis is about money in the end, because law is a business, and if there is no profit, there is no business. So simple is it. And if you want to be a top-tier law firm, it's like a football club. If you want to be FC Barcelona, you need money to buy the best players. That's how it is. We can't change it. And if we want to offer people an interesting future, we must remain profitable. And we must be, it's not about rewarding them, it's about, let's say, attracting the best work. And we can be profitable in every single segment of the law. We can be profitable on the high end, like Clifford, and we can be profitable as Axiom. Just the only thing we need to do is to adapt and tune our business model towards our area. And the only thing we're not doing, and that's Neil's option, doing nothing, is being the jack of all trades, being everything for everyone. And I can promise you, in every jurisdiction, maybe at a later point of time, but that will be, let's say there will be an end to that. We need to adapt.
Well, yeah, I know that Carlos doesn't quite accept your proposition that law is just a business.
Exactly. No, let me just answer your question half an hour ago, and then your proposition very quickly. I think, indeed, we have to preserve an atmosphere where lawyers earn their living. This is crucial, because if we are desperate, we are not going to manage correctly the conflict of interest. But having said that, being the top earners, that's not what moves young people. I think good young people are moved really by the internal goods that I've said before. Vocation, we are here to serve the rule, etc. So I would insist over and over in recuperating these values of tradition in this respect.
One more quick point from Neil, then we'll go into the room, because I'm keen that we've got all this expertise in the room as well. We need to draw on it.
Just two things, just to say on what Carlos just said. I think that's, so do we mean, so should we be ensuring that doctors always have a decent earning? So instead of treating my ingrowing toenail, they take the cheaper option and chop my foot off. I mean, where does that stop? Just the second point is, going back to the previous, where we were talking previously, isn't one of the problems is that lawyers have been doing work that lawyers don't need to do. I can think of or people as qualified as a fully qualified solicitor, say, needs to do. There's a firm I'm aware of, it's a probate company in England that it's not a law firm because all the work they do isn't what we call reserved work. They have broken down the probate process into 166 discrete tasks. They allocate those tasks to different people at different levels, and only a small number of those 166 tasks are actually dealt with by qualified lawyers. And they're able to offer a cheaper, and it would appear, because they're quite successful, they're a big company, one of the biggest probate providers in the country, a successful service.
So, Carlos.
Perhaps we can ask the floor directly.
Okay, questions from the floor? Or comments from the floor, but if there are comments, can we just try and keep them succinct and to the point? Imagine you're straight into court and the judge wants to know what it's about.
Do anyone agree with the example of the doctor? Or disagree?
Yes.
Yes, Michael. Microphone.
I was interested in Robert's description of what I would say is probably a firm that's deconstructing itself. There's a lot of discussion, especially with big city law firms, which, let's be blunt, no matter what the panel are saying, are driven by partner profit. Certainly I'm from Belfast, as you know, a large number of law firms now have back office offices in Belfast where they outsource work of different levels of ability. That's happening more and more, as I understand it, in law firms around the world. Robert describes an example within his office where I assume, Robert, you were probably using staff employed by you, but I can see the example where you're sitting with a small coterie of partners in small premises and where all the jobs below that level are outsourced at a cheaper rate, be that, as you were saying, in terms of the probate, the legal aspects, the non-legal aspects, with a partner at the top of that, and a different structure from the traditional, 2,000 lawyer, big city partnerships that we see at the moment. I just wonder if anybody has a view on that. I mean, there is a viewpoint that, in fact, that's the way law firms are going to go in the future, and that this model of huge law firms with many partners is no longer a good model. But I just wonder if you have any view on that.
So, Boris, the boss Boris.
I'm happy to do an attempt. You're obviously totally right that we see more and more outsourcing options rising all over the world. We have our own center in India. I think it's important to realize, at least from where we stand, that is very much driven by client demand. If we would keep on doing certain tasks, which can equally well done in Jaap's terms by someone else, but much cheaper, then our clients will definitely want that option. I think where we are moving as a law firm is that initially we found that also very difficult. You sort of accept that there's some kind of disaggregation of legal services also on one and the same transaction, where you could have that Clifford Chance does the negotiations of the SPA, and then other people within that same transaction do something else. So how far that will go, as to your question, I think as far what we are learning now is, I think, where do we really add value to the client? And that will be, for us, the most sophisticated part of the transaction. That we also add value to the client to ensure that the overall transaction is coordinated in a proper way. So there's definitely also a lot of work around that, because no matter how we arrange it contractually with our legal service provider or the outsourced party or Axiom, in the end we will feel that our reputation is at stake when something goes wrong on the overall transaction. Because if there's one thing we can't do, it's put our quality at risk. And that's with all the different and new ways of working together with other parties, that for us we can never compromise on that. So that means that there are definitely limits to what you can outsource and what you can do, and we'll definitely have to learn and find out where those limits are, but it's very much client-driven, and so that's what we need to be aware of.
And to be clear then, the client knows when you're outsourcing tasks to India.
Oh, absolutely. It works in two ways. One, we have transactions where the client will ask us to come with a fee quote, which says, when Clifford Chance does it all by yourself, basically, and a fee quote where you basically work together with a legal service outsourcing company or an Axiom. That's the way that the client approaches it, and so it's totally transparent. Often the other party provider will contract separately with the client on that, and we make very good arrangements on how we work together. But the quality, that's where we never ever can compromise on, because otherwise it's at stake. So the client is driving it, the client is totally into it, and the client very, very much appreciates it when we come up with a better value proposition and are honest enough to say, maybe that work should be done by someone else. And it doesn't have to be our people in India. It can also be, we also work with other law firms, smaller law firms, where we think it's the best solution for the client.
Neil,
so yes. Can I ask, what do you anticipate that will mean for the shape of of Clifford chart, say in 10 years' time, and everyone always has this, the pyramid, the law firm pyramid and leverage. I don't know what your leverage is, what's that, 4 associates to every partner or what have you. In 10 years' time, do you anticipate actually you're going to be a much slimmer organisation next?
I find it really difficult to predict, to be honest. So far, despite of all the changes that we have already put in, we have grown because our clients really like the fact that we make those changes. Over time, we will see, in my view, different roles appearing within the law firm, which will likely have an impact on the structure of the composition of the law firm. Yeah.
I think we've got some questions in the room. Yep. Is that Ken? Oh, there are two questions then. There's one there. Jean-Louis.
It seems this conversation is moving into the specific issues that big law firms are facing. As a partner in one of them, Cleary Gottlieb, I know the subject, but I think that probably the bulk of people in the room, that's only after all a small fraction of the legal community, and I think most people are probably interested in what happens to the if I can say, smaller firms. I think the big firms can deal for themselves and they have the financial means to address them. For the panel and having the concerns of the smaller firms in mind, I have the following questions. It seems to me there are kind of 2 models that can emerge. One is to say the commoditization of what they're doing will lead to a vast majority of what they're now doing will just be handed over to rocket lawyers and others, will just be abandoned by law firms, and those law firms will then be specialized boutiques who will concentrate on kind of specific bespoke kind of high-end kind of work in that market for the smaller firms. The alternative model, which I would be interested in hearing your views on, is that IT and the other developments that we're talking about would indeed enable even those firms to hang on to their market shares and avoid that commoditization will just mean loss of business. Just be interested in your views on that.
Robert, like to come back on that?
I thought I tried to give some reassurance to those smaller firms, actually. I mean, I think that what we've heard from Ross, and I was very encouraged that it was recognised and presented anyway as being something that would provide additional resource to solicitors or lawyers, and it seems to me, that practitioners, that the cost of accessing that information is going to be considerably less than might otherwise be the case. When my firm merged back in 2000, one of the drivers for merger was the capacity to invest in the IT that our clients required us to have, case management and stuff like that. I don't think that would be a driver these days, and I think actually the cost of accessing is going to fall. And therefore, I think, again, the statistics we got from our research, 60% of people buy by reference to accessing specialist knowledge. Now, how you define specialist knowledge in those circumstances, but it seems to me that that's going to be around interpretation of the information that is available. I think that one of the things that interests me in this whole debate is the level of public legal education, which certainly I think in England and Wales is at a woefully low level at the moment, and things could be done. But in the moment, for the time being, there is a significant opportunity, I think, for the cost of practice, again, the way you use premises, the way you use people, the way you use resource, and therefore a good opportunity for firms. But there is always that generational bit in addition to the use of the IT, and in addition to the generational bit is the level of public knowledge. And so all those things need to be kept in check to make sure that you're confident that your firm is still providing value to the clients you want to represent. But I think if you can do that, you have a good future.
And so we've got another one. Yep.
Yes,
gentleman there.
Ken Murphy from the Law Society of Ireland, very much led in and by the colleague from Cleary Gottlieb who asked the last question. Just to try and put an even finer and more precise point on the question, the great majority of law firms that I'm aware of around the world and from jurisdictions everywhere are very small firms, as in perhaps even sole practitioner firms. I think that's probably, in terms of the numeracy, certainly in Ireland, the proportion of firms are probably sole practitioner firms, and many of them are general practice sole practitioner firms. So to put a very just specific question, what future is there for generalist sole practitioner lawyers anywhere?
Well, Ken, that's a very good question. Any views on this?
I think commoditization, I agree with the Dean of the Irish Bar completely. I think commoditization depends on the level of clients. Some, to big transactions, maybe project finance is already a commodity, but maybe on a smaller level it's not yet a commodity. So we need to see case by case. But I remember in the late 80s, there was an article in the International Financial Law Review saying the end of the mid-sized law firms. It has never happened. So I think it's very good what we all think how to progress, but I don't think that we are going necessarily to disappear, nor the journalists. So we would not play with the fear, but with thought.
I just query, Carlos, whether it's never happened or whether it's not happened. But anyway, we'll see about that. I mean, I suppose, Ken, that one of the issues there is the one-man band getting access to some expertise. I mean, that's how the solicitor and barristers, you well know, work together. But if the one-man band has access to specialist expertise in many areas, then that can help him to build teams for different jobs. So he's the man of confidence for the client, because of course in the UK and Ireland we don't have the notary, who's the man of confidence who will help people through their drafting, their wills, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that, let's say, that I think is wrong, and there is a role for bar societies. If you study law at university, who teaches you how to do business? No one. And yet most of you indeed are sole practitioners, and you have a business of your own, and yet you're never trained. I think there is an issue. If we want to secure a future generation of lawyers, if we want to create access to justice, then every sole practitioner must be able to run a profitable business. We need to teach them. It's not only about access to Ross, it's also about access on how to do a business.
Well, I mean, that raises a broader question, doesn't it? Which is that legal education is focused on educating really top quality lawyers with technical legal skills, and yet you need many other legal skills to be a successful professional.
But there is one thing I would add to that. I have given a lecture to the professors of a university recently. And I said, what you are doing is basically, let's say, you're liable, because what you are doing is teaching students to reproduce the law. My friends, that Ross can do. That computers can't do. We don't need to train people to do something that the computer can do better once they've finished training. We need to train them on human skills. The computer will not take away our human skills, negotiation skills, strategy, empathy, all those things that humans need to do, and we need to train them on business. In order for the sole practitioners to survive, we need to change the education.
Bruno.
Yeah, I think that I will speak under the supervision of Mr. Sicard here, but I think that in the Paris lawyer schools they're learning how to run a legal firm as a business. At the university we're slowly moving, but we're learning that we don't have to teach the students only the basics of law, but also how to work law, how to reason like a lawyer. So no, it's a slow movement, but we're getting to it.
Yeah.
And with technology, actually, that levels the playing field, doesn't it? You don't. Previously, only the large law firm could have the huge law library, and now all you need is everyone just needs a subscription to LexisNexis or what have you. One other option, and we're starting to see this in England and Wales now, also for smaller firms, are multidisciplinary practices. My father has been a high street accountant for 50 years. I've been telling him that he should be linking up with a lawyer and offer a professional supermarket. And we're seeing more and more interesting combinations. There are businesses in the UK that are redefining what a law firm looks like. There's one I can think of very quickly called Shillings, which is very famous for acting for celebrities, used to be very famous for acting for celebrities suing newspapers, but now they are a reputation management business They're still a law, at the core, they're still a law firm, but they have cybersecurity specialists, they have risk managers, and law is just one bit of what they do. So I think people need to broaden out their thinking of what a legal business is.
Okay, so change of training. I mean, also teamwork comes into that as well, the way in which the senior lawyers work with the junior lawyers. I think that's something that is evolving in some firms. The problem-based learning that very often that's in our university, that's what we had. We had no questions to trot out the law. It was all about hypothetical questions, and you had to answer the question. And so it's starting to build an idea of the lawyer giving judgment. Come on, in the room, I'm just conscious that in the room, you're rather silent for this sort of issue, which I think is an important issue for the future. Yes, we have a question there in the middle, or a comment.
Hi, I'm Ailey Wiseman, President of Law Society of Scotland. I'd just like to pick up on something that Robert mentioned about the lack of gender balance on your panel. Because I actually think one of the biggest issues facing the profession worldwide, and certainly Europe-wide, is sustainability around retaining women within the workforce. Certainly in our jurisdiction, 70% of law graduates are female, but we have a very significant dropout rate. Very many women leave before they even have a family because they don't see how they would be able to make it work. There's a whole piece needing done around culture, around attitudes, around agile working, around moving away from part-time working as if it's something that's, you know, not acceptable, and rethinking how we actually approach all of these issues in relation to gender, not just for women, but for men as well. And unless that is tackled, that will be the death of the law firm and private practice, and it really needs to be handled very quickly and swiftly. Thank you.
Right. Some reactions from our panel, and then I think we'll be done. Any reactions? I mean,
well, I'd like to react. I think the lady is absolutely right, and also make the point myself. I think this is also, this changing world is also an introduction of new roles is definitely what we see also a much better way to hold on to talent, to change the demographics of our partnership and the people who work within the firm. So couldn't agree more.
But also, the more varied legal market now is offering new opportunities. There's a business called Obelisk Legal Support in England and Wales, which it offers temporary support largely to in-house legal teams and law firms that just need extra teams to do a particular deal. They have about 500-600 lawyers on their books at the moment, maybe more now. They're almost all women. They are people who have left the profession to have children, etc. And they have men as well, and they're able to take on temporary assignments. And the market is adapting to offer some roles and different options for people who want different ways of living their lives.
Right. Well, on that note, Neil, I think that's. I think we've done the subject for now. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation.